A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Films I'm Willing to Talk About Again. So, what I got here for today, Friday, is, simply put, another occasion where I can basically talk a bit about some things in mind regarding a movie that I have previously watched before, and with the fact that I was able to get a somewhat recent revisiting of Rio from 2011, I feel like now would actually be a good time to get that in motion. And so, Rio it is. Now I know that there are in fact other Rio films out there. Those can probably be different subjects for another day, because I'm going to focus on this piece right here from Blue Sky from 2011. Rio in fact stars a famous blue macaw who's simply given the name Blue, because unfortunately the opening sequence gives a bit of a musical type setting, but it does center around a blue macaw hatchling whom is just simply given the name Blue, like I've said. And unfortunately, things don't quite turn out well for him, because smugglers get into the jungle of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and capture him. They have him sent away all the way off to the United States, in the state of Minnesota, where a local store owner named Linda apparently finds him out in the open and decides to adopt him. She keeps him around the place, and he actually does make some nice company, because one morning at 7:15 a.m. she gets up only to realize that her alarm clock, while it seems to have gone off even after she unplugs it, turns out it's just Blue right above her messing with her. Yeah. He's right there imitating the alarm clock sound. Kind of like what some birds I know in real life can actually do. I mean, you know, those birds who could probably talk, and those birds who could probably make funny noises and all that good stuff. Yeah, it certainly wasn't uncommon for certain bird species, like the macaw, for instance, to basically create these kind of noises. But by all means, it was simply a nice little thing that we had gotten right here at the beginning. And essentially, what we have here is a blue macaw living in the state of Minnesota, which you'd think that it wouldn't necessarily work out too well. But Blue does, believe it or not, actually adapt to it quite well, despite how cold it is and whatnot. And it's just mostly movie logic, made up and whatnot. We know that with some species of animals, they aren't necessarily built to survive in certain elements of weather and temperatures and whatnot, so by all logic, it would normally be that a blue macaw, or macaws in general, would sometimes have certain effects after being in a certain environment for too long. But of course, well, guess what happens next? News apparently gets around that there's actually a fellow blue macaw who apparently is the only other survivor of their species. So, what does Blue want to do? Well, he actually wants to go back to Rio de Janeiro, right where he originally came from, and try to find her. Well, her name is Jewel, basically. And when they do encounter each other, you'd think it would be a splendid welcome, that two macaws face to face would get along, but it doesn't. Jewel is in fact the more fierce, independent, and somewhat arguable type. So, and well, you might think that eventually it would get along well, but it does give a slow build up. I mean, while Blue happens to be the kind and gold-hearted fellow out there, you have Jewel who can sort of be the opposite. But hey, as we know, sometimes if a girl can get mad at you, it actually is, believe it or not, a sign that she might actually like you. And this is actually a fact, believe it or not. So, not much more to that. So, it actually would be some time before eventually they do try to find solace in life. And knowing that they're the only two blue macaws in existence, supposedly, as this movie tells us, well, it's kind of like in a similar regard to how in Ice Age, when Manny meets Ellie for the first time, you know, they're the only two woolly mammoths left on Earth. And You know, it was basically a lot like when Ellie thought she was an opossum because she has two twin brothers, Crash and Eddie, and Manny does sort of think she's losing it. So, in a similar regard, we have Rio with two blue macaws who apparently don't quite get along, and, you know, it eventually comes to a terms of, are they truly going to go extinct? You know, it's that kind of moment that builds a bit of tension here and there. But as the movie goes on, other characters like Nico enter the picture, and lots of silliness and craziness goes down. Blue eventually learns how to dance once he hits up a musical joint with fellow birds and whatnot. But then we come along to a certain white bird. Yeah, who would have believed? A white bird out there who apparently is rather feisty. Even more so than Jewel. This is another case where we have more than one main antagonist to deal with. The very same smugglers that captured Blue took him from his home and put him all the way out in the States. So, think about it. It's basically Blue meeting up with some old enemies of his. And he has to find peace with himself, as well as his new fellow macaw. So, what it eventually boils down to is that after some time passes, and after some help from locals, including a young boy, well, eventually, when Linda and the likes get along to try to find Blue and also try to ensure he doesn't get captured and possibly made extinct alongside Jewel, it eventually all boils down to an incredible final scene where they all show up at an airport, and while the smugglers somehow manage to slip away easily, it's not quite over yet, because Blue and Jewel actually managed to work together. So, at the end of the day, this is basically a big point in history when Blue Sky was able to give us an impressive level of tension, as well as give us an amazing piece of cultural regarding that this is one of those cases where you have a movie that takes place at Brazil more so than anywhere else. I mean, with the majority of movies, it can be America, Canada, select parts of Europe and Asia, but hardly South America. You know, it's not really often where we happen to have the likes of Brazil, for instance. Oh, but you know, since Up managed to make it so amazing, well, 2 years later comes another movie from a different company that gives us a similar regard to how South America can have just as much significance regarding pop culture. And to that, I'd say they did a swell job operating in that field. And so, I give Rio a good 7.2 out of 10.1. Probably not the best way to interpret birds in a movie. I mean, have you seen Migration, for instance? That was impressive. But hey, don't take my word for it. Go see the movie for yourself. 12 years older, that one is, compared to Migration. And Rio still does live up quite well. And the fact is, it also has itself a sequel. And there's actually been talks about other things going around with it. And I'm not so sure about how most of the cast and crew members would come around. But hey, it is what it is. And to that, my review of this, or revisitation I could just say, is pretty much over. Maybe I could go into even better detail on this at some point, because there's only so much that I could truly take away. And I'd say it might be for the best. So, I'll see you guys later in films I'm willing to talk about again.
Whenever I want, I usually get, and I'm thinking I want you, but I don't have you yet. I ain't got no trick.